My name is Martha Sanders. I'm 62 years old, and at my own daughter's wedding, I exposed a lie so monstrous it brought two powerful families to their knees. What I did that day was the hardest and, I believe, the very best thing I have ever done. It's a long story, but one I feel I have to tell. Before we get into it, I'd love to know where you're all listening from. I'm here in Austin, Texas, where the sun is just starting to climb. Let me know in the comments what country you're in and what time it is there. It warms my heart to know we can share stories across the world like this. It all started, as so many heartaches do, with love and money. Specifically, with the money my husband David left behind. David was a good man, a high school history teacher who could make the driest parts of the Civil War sound like a thrilling movie. He wasn't a man of great wealth, but he was a man of great foresight. For 35 years, he meticulously paid into a life insurance policy, a safety net he built for me and our two children, Emily and Jacob. When he passed away from a sudden heart attack 2 years ago, the grief was a physical weight. It felt like the color had been drained from the world. The funeral was a blur of casseroles and sympathetic whispers. After everyone had gone home and the quiet of the house became a roar in my ears, I found the policy documents in his old roll-top desk. The final check from the insurance company was for a little over $100,000. It was the sum total of his life's careful planning, his final act of looking after us, his inheritance. In the haze of those first few months, I made a silent promise to his photograph on the mantel. "I'll be smart with it, David," I whispered. "I'll protect it. I'll make sure it goes toward their true happiness, their security." I thought of the kids' futures, maybe helping Jacob with a down payment on a house, or setting up a proper college fund for the grandchildren I hope to have one day. But plans, as they say, are often just wishes you make before life decides to laugh at you. A year later, my daughter Emily brought home Mark. On the surface, he was everything a mother could wish for. He was handsome in that clean-cut East Coast way, with a smile that seemed to have its own lighting crew. He came from the Vance family, a name that meant something in Texas. Old money from oil and new money from tech. He showered Emily with gifts, whisked her away on weekend trips, and spoke of their future with a confidence that bordered on arrogance. I tried to like him. I truly did, but there was something in his eyes that never quite matched his smile. A coolness, a transactional quality that made the hairs on my arms stand up. When he looked at Emily, it wasn't with the adoring gaze David used to give me. It was the look of a man appraising a prize he had just won. Emily, however, was blinded by the sparkle. She had always been the dreamer in the family, the one who wanted the fairy tale. And Mark, with his family's fortune and grand gestures, was her Prince Charming. When he proposed with a diamond that looked like an ice cube, she was ecstatic. And then came the wedding plans. "Mom, it has to be at the Vance family's country club," she said, her eyes wide with excitement. "And the dress I saw, it's a designer gown. It's perfect. It's everything." I saw the price tags, the venue, the caterer, the 10-piece band, the flowers flown in from Holland. It all added up to a number that made me feel dizzy. A number that was almost identical to the amount sitting in the bank account under David's name. "Honey, this is, a lot," I said gently one afternoon, spreading the brochures out on my kitchen table. "It's more than a teacher's salary for 2 years." That's when she played her trump card. She came and sat beside me, taking my hand in hers. Her touch was soft, her voice even softer. "Mom, this is our one chance to really become part of their family, to have the security I've always dreamed of. Think of it as an investment in my happiness, in my future." She looked at me, her eyes welling up with perfectly timed tears. It's what Dad would have wanted, for me to be happy and taken care of. She invoked his name. She twisted my promise to him into a weapon against me. The rational part of my brain screamed, "No! This isn't security, this is a performance." But the mother in my heart, the part that ached to see my daughter's dreams come true, was weaker. I looked at her hopeful, pleading face, and I caved. The next day, I went to the bank. The young teller who helped me looked concerned as I filled out the withdrawal slip. She asked, "Are you sure about this, Mrs. Sanders? This is a very large amount." I forced a smile. I said, "It's for my daughter's wedding." The words tasting like ash in my mouth. I heard myself say them. I watched my hand sign the paper, but it felt like I was watching someone else. I was taking the shield my husband had built to protect our family and handing it over to be used as a prop in a play. And as I walked out of the bank with that cashier's check in my purse, a cold dread settled over me. I didn't know why, not then. I just knew I had made a terrible mistake. I had broken my promise to David. The wedding weekend was a full-blown production, held at the Vance family's country club in Howard outside of Austin. The place was less than a home, more like a resort, with rolling green lawns, a staff of uniformed housekeepers, and a sense of quiet, intimidating wealth that made my modest three-bedroom house feel like a garden shed. The rehearsal dinner was a blur of champagne flutes, air kisses, and conversations about stock portfolios and summering in the Hamptons. I felt like a visitor from another planet. Mark's parents, Robert and Catherine Vance, were polite in a detached, formal way. They smiled at me, but their eyes scanned the room, constantly assessing, networking. They treated me like a quaint little footnote in their grand life story. Emily, meanwhile, flitted from group to group, her laughter a little too loud, her grip on Mark's arm a little too tight. She was performing the role of her life. After the dinner, I went up to the guest suite they'd assigned me. It was larger than my entire living room. Exhausted, I started to unpack the small bag I'd brought. In it was a box of old keepsakes I'd planned to give Emily. Her baby shoes, a lock of her hair, some faded photos. Tucked inside was an old baby monitor, the kind you could hear a pin drop from 2 rooms away. I'd brought it thinking it might be a sweet, nostalgic gift for when she had her own kids. On a whim, just to see if the old things still worked after years in storage, I plugged the receiver into the wall outlet by the bed. I set the transmitter on the dresser and turned them both on. A faint static hissed from the small speaker. It worked. I was about to turn it off when a voice cut through the static, sharp and clear. It was Mark. His room was at the end of the long, carpeted hallway, but the monitor was picking up his voice as if he were standing right next to me. My heart gave a little jolt. I knew I shouldn't listen, that it was an invasion of privacy. I reached to turn it off, but his tone stopped me. It was cold, dismissive. Nothing like the charming man from downstairs. "Just relax, man. It's all handled," he was saying. Another voice, one I recognized as his best man and lifelong friend, Ryan, laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. "Handled? You're marrying a girl who's pregnant with another guy's kid. I'd say it's far from handled." The air left my lungs. The room, which a moment ago had felt cavernous, now seemed to be closing in on me. I sank onto the edge of the bed. My hand clamped over my mouth to stifle a gasp. Another guy's kid? No, it couldn't be. It was a joke. A sick, horrible joke. But then Mark spoke again, and his voice was devoid of any humor. "She thinks it's mine. Her family thinks it's mine. That's all that matters. It gets me the Vance family trust my grandfather set up, and it gets me a wife who knows she owes me. It's a perfect arrangement." The Vance family trust. The inheritance that required him to be married. This wasn't about love. It wasn't even about a mistake. It was a transaction, a business deal. Ryan laughed again.
That same ugly sound. So what happens when the kid comes out looking like me? My blood ran cold. Ryan? The best friend? The man who had just given a toast to love and fidelity an hour ago? He won't, Mark said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that the baby monitor amplified with horrific clarity. And even if he does, who's she gonna tell? By then, it's too late. The papers are signed. The deal is done. There was a pause, and then the words that would be seared into my brain forever. She's yours now, man. Good luck raising my kid. The last part was from Ryan, a final cruel twist of the knife followed by that laugh again. I finally fumbled for the off switch, my fingers numb and clumsy. The static cut out, leaving a silence that was more deafening than their voices. I sat there, on the perfectly made bed in that perfect soulless room, and the world tilted on its axis. The money, my husband's legacy, my daughter's radiant happiness. It was all a lie. A carefully constructed, monstrous lie. Emily wasn't just a girl in love. She was a participant in a fraud. She was selling herself and her child for a place in this cold, empty world of theirs. And she had used my love, my grief, and my promise to my dead husband to pay for the ticket. I didn't cry. The shock was too profound, too absolute for tears. It was a piece of ice forming in my chest, spreading through my veins until I felt completely, utterly frozen. I thought of Emily's pleading eyes. I thought of the cashier's check. I thought of David's smiling face in the photograph on my mantle. And in that moment, the grief and the shock and the heartbreak began to burn away, leaving something else in their place, something hard and clear and dangerous, resolute. They thought I was a quaint little footnote, a simple grieving widow easily parted from her money. They thought I was a pawn in their game. They were about to find out how wrong they were. I wasn't just a mother. I was David's wife, and no one was going to tarnish his legacy and get away with it. The play was not over. The final act had yet to be written, and I was going to be the one to write it. I didn't sleep. How could I? I sat in a high-backed armchair by the window, watching the moon crawl across the sky, the monstrous words I'd overheard playing on a loop in my head. Good luck raising my kid. Each time the phrase hit me with the force of a physical blow. The plan began to form in the dark, not as a coherent strategy at first, but as a series of jagged, angry necessities. I needed proof. I needed allies. And first, I needed to know the full scope of the rot within my own family. I needed to talk to Jacob. My son Jacob was the opposite of Emily in almost every way. Where she was a dreamer, he was a pragmatist. He worked as an accountant for a mid-sized firm, a steady, reliable man who valued spreadsheets and certainty. He loved his sister, but he saw her clearly. I knew he had reservations about Mark, though he'd never said so directly. I found him the next morning, at the pre-wedding brunch, a lavish affair set up on a terrace overlooking the estate's private golf course. He was standing alone by the mimosa bar, looking uncomfortable in his tailored suit. He saw me approaching, and his face, already pale, seemed to lose another shade of color. "Mom," he said, forcing a smile, "you're up early." "I couldn't sleep," I said, keeping my voice even. I picked up a glass of orange juice, my hand steady, despite the tremor I felt inside. "Jacob, can we talk for a minute? In private?" We walked away from the chatter of the party, towards a quiet corner of the terrace shaded by a massive oak tree. I turned to face him, my heart aching. This was my boy, my steady, honest son. I had to know. "Jacob," I began, my voice softer now. "I have a strange feeling about all of this. About Mark. About this wedding. You know your sister. You know how she can get carried away. I need you to be honest with me. Is there something I should know?" He wouldn't meet my eyes. He stared at the perfectly manicured grass, his jaw tight. Mom, don't do this. Not today. It's her wedding day. Just let her be happy. The plea in his voice was my confirmation. He knew something. Happiness built on a lie isn't happiness, Jacob. It's a prison. Your father. Your father valued truth above everything. He used to say, a lie is a debt to the truth and it always gets collected. What would he think of us, standing here, letting a lie this big go unanswered? His composure cracked. A look of profound misery washed over his face. I don't know everything, Mom. I swear. I just... I knew she was pregnant before he proposed. She told me. She begged me not to say anything. She said Mark was going to step up, that he loved her, that this was the only way for the baby to have a good life, a father. She said you'd worry and try to stop it.
He was a good man in an impossible position. Emily had manipulated him, using his love for her and his desire for his niece or nephew to have a stable home as leverage. He didn't know the cruelest part of the truth, the part about Ryan, but he knew enough. He knew it was a shotgun wedding built on a shaky foundation, and he had chosen to protect his sister's fantasy over telling his mother the truth. His betrayal was one of silence, but it was a betrayal nonetheless. She told you she was pregnant, and that Mark was the father, and you helped her convince me to spend your father's entire inheritance on this production? Every word was deliberate, heavy with the weight of my disappointment. He finally looked at me, his eyes filled with tears. She said he'd just gotten a big promotion and that they'd pay you back over time. She made it sound so reasonable. I didn't know. I didn't want to ruin things for her. I'm sorry, Mom. God, I'm so sorry. I felt a flash of anger, hot and sharp, but it was quickly replaced by a profound sadness. He wasn't a villain. He was just a weak man who loved his sister and had been played by a master manipulator. He was a victim too, in his own way, but I couldn't afford to have weak people on my side right now. I needed soldiers. I'm not the one you need to be sorry to, Jacob, I said, my voice hardening again. You need to look in the mirror and ask yourself what kind of man you want to be. The kind who stands by and watches a lie unfold because it's easier, or the kind your father raised you to be. I left him standing there under the oak tree, his shoulders slumped in defeat. I had my answer. I was on my own. My son would not be my ally, but his guilt, I realized, could be a tool. I just didn't know how I would use it yet. As I walked back toward the brunch, my resolve solidified into a cold, hard diamond. The plan was no longer just a vague idea. It was becoming a blueprint. Phase 1 was complete. I knew where my son stood. Now it was time to gather my ammunition. The hours leading up to the ceremony were the longest of my life. I had to wear a mask, a placid smile for the photographers, a look of maternal pride for the endless parade of guests who wanted to congratulate me. Each smile felt like a crack in my face. Each thank you felt like a lie I was telling myself. Inside, I was a general preparing for war. I went to Emily's bridal suite to help her get ready. The room was a chaotic explosion of silk, tulle, and makeup artists. Emily was sitting in front of a mirror, a team of people fussing over her hair and face. She looked like a princess from a fairy tale, beautiful and radiant and completely oblivious to the storm gathering around her. She saw my reflection in the mirror and her face lit up. "Mom, there you are! What do you think?" "You're beautiful, sweetheart," I said, and that part was true. She was stunning. My voice was steady, betraying none of the turmoil inside me. I moved through the room, a ghost in a mother-of-the-bride dress, observing every detail. Later, after the hair and makeup people had packed up, we had a few moments alone. Emily was standing in her $40,000 gown, a cloud of white fabric that had cost my husband's legacy. She turned to me, and for a second, the mask of the radiant bride slipped. I saw a flicker of the little girl she used to be, a flicker of fear. "Mom," she whispered, her voice small, "I'm so nervous." She came over and hugged me.
It was a strange, hollow embrace. I could feel the frantic beating of her heart against my chest. I just, I'm scared I'm not good enough for them, she confessed into my shoulder. For Mark, for his family. It's all so much. And there it was, the crack in her facade. This wasn't just about greed. It was about a deep, gnawing insecurity that I, as her mother, had somehow failed to see or failed to heal. She wasn't just marrying a man, she was trying to marry a new identity, one she thought was better than her own. She was so desperate to escape her own skin that she was willing to build a new life on a foundation of lies. For a split second, my resolve wavered. My heart ached for that scared little girl. I wanted to hold her and tell her she was enough, that she didn't need any of this. But then I remembered the cold, calculating words from the night before. It's a perfect arrangement. This was not just a moment of weakness. It was a long-term strategy of deceit. My sympathy curdled back into steely determination. Everything will be fine, I said, patting her back. You just take a deep breath. She pulled away, her bride mask firmly back in place. You're right. It's going to be the perfect day. I need to use the restroom before we go. I'll be right back. This was my chance. I knew Emily had left her laptop open on the vanity in the adjoining dressing room. She was careless with her technology, always logged into everything. For years, our family had a shared cloud account to sync photos and calendars. It was a long shot, but I had to try. I walked into the dressing room and closed the door. My hands were shaking as I sat down in front of her laptop. I opened the web browser. She was logged into her email. My heart hammered against my ribs. I felt like a thief, a spy in my own daughter's life. But what she had done was a far greater violation. I typed in Ryan into the search bar. A chain of emails appeared. My eyes scanned the subject lines until one from 2 months ago made me stop cold. The subject was The Solution. I clicked it open. It was an email from Emily to a college friend. My breath hitched as I read the words on the screen. So, the solution is in motion. Mark agreed. He'll say the baby is his. It's crazy, I know, but it's the only way. I can't be a single mother. I just can't. My mom would be so disappointed, and I can't lose Mark in this life. He's my future. This is just a secret we'll have to keep forever. He gets his family trust, I get a husband, and the baby gets a father with the right last name. It's better for everyone in the long run, right? I stared at the screen, the words burning into my retinas. Better for everyone. She had rationalized it, twisted it into an act of pragmatic love. She had documented her own fraud. My mind went into overdrive. I quickly forwarded the email to my own address. Then, as a backup, I hit print. The printer in the corner of the room whirred to life. It sounded as loud as a jet engine. I prayed no one would come in. It printed 2 copies. I folded them carefully, my hands surprisingly steady now, and slipped them into the small, elegant purse that matched my dress. I deleted the forwarded email from her sent folder and cleared the browser history. The whole operation took less than 3 minutes.
I walked out of the dressing room, my face a calm, placid mask. Emily was looking at her reflection, adjusting a stray curl. She didn't even look up. "Ready, Mom?" she asked. "Ready," I said. The word felt true. I had the ammunition. Now I just had to find the right person to give the gun to. My target was not Mark, Emily, or Ryan. Attacking them directly would be messy, a chaotic he said, she said that they could easily dismiss as the ramblings of a hysterical, grieving widow. No, my target was the one person in their ecosystem who held all the real power, the one person whose judgment was absolute, Eleanor Vance. Eleanor was Mark's great-aunt, the matriarch of the Vance clan. She was a formidable woman in her late 70s, with piercing blue eyes and a posture as straight and unbending as her reputation. She had inherited control of the family's primary trust and wielded it like a scepter. While Mark's parents cared about appearances and money, Eleanor, I'd heard whispered, cared about only one thing: the Vance family name and the honor it represented. She was the queen on their chessboard, and I knew, to win the game, you had to get to the queen. I found my opportunity during the brief cocktail hour in the church's elegant reception hall before the ceremony began. The air was thick with the scent of lilies and expensive perfume. Eleanor was holding court in a corner, seated in a high-backed velvet chair, a small circle of deferential family members surrounding her. Taking a deep breath, I straightened my shoulders and walked toward her. It felt like walking into a lion's den. As I approached, the small circle parted, their curious eyes on me. "Mrs. Vance," I said, my voice clear and respectful. "I'm Martha Sanders, Emily's mother. I hope I'm not interrupting." Eleanor's gaze swept over me, her expression unreadable. She was appraising me, from my sensible shoes to my carefully chosen dress. "Mrs. Sanders, of course. Please," she said, gesturing to an empty chair beside her. It felt less like an invitation and more like a summons. I sat down. The other family members, sensing a private conversation, discreetly moved away. "It's a beautiful ceremony you've all put together," I began, my hands folded calmly in my lap. My purse, containing the printed emails, felt like it weighed 100 pounds. But then my gaze fell on Mark's smug face at the altar. I saw Ryan's casual arrogance. I saw Eleanor Vance seated across the aisle, her face an unreadable granite slab. And I remembered the cold, hard words from the baby monitor. "She's yours now, man. Good luck raising my kid." This wasn't a mistake to be fixed. It was a conspiracy to be exposed. My love for my daughter had to be tough enough to withstand this. Saving her future meant I had to destroy her present. Emily reached the altar. The Vance uncle placed her hand in Mark's. Mark lifted her veil, and they shared a practiced, passionless kiss on the cheek for the cameras. The ceremony began. The priest, an older man with a gentle voice, spoke of love, honor, and the sanctity of marriage. His words were beautiful, poetic, and utterly hollow in the face of the truth. Every mention of trust and fidelity was like a drumbeat, counting down the seconds to the explosion I was about to detonate. I clutched my purse in my lap. Inside, the two folded pieces of paper felt as heavy as stone tablets. My plan was simple. I wouldn't cause a scene by yelling. I wouldn't play a recording for the whole church to hear. That was too clumsy, too theatrical. My plan was quieter, more precise. It was a surgical strike, aimed directly at the heart of the enemy's power structure. The priest moved on to the vows. "Do you, Mark, take Emily to be your lawfully wedded wife?" He spoke the sacred words, and Mark repeated them, his voice ringing with false sincerity. "I do." Then it was Emily's turn. "Do you, Emily, take Mark to be your lawfully wedded husband?" She took a deep breath. I could see her small hand trembling in Mark's grasp. And then the priest said the words I had been waiting for, the words that were my cue, my open door. "If there is anyone present who knows any reason why this couple should not be joined in holy matrimony, let them speak now or forever hold their peace." A traditional, usually unanswered line. The church was silent. The priest smiled, ready to continue. In that silence, I stood up. The rustle of my dress was the only sound. Every head in the front half of the church turned toward me. Jacob gasped. Emily's eyes widened in horror. Mark's smile froze on his face. The final countdown was over. The time had come. The silence in the church was absolute, a thick, heavy blanket that smothered all other sound. It was broken only by the soft click of my heels on the stone floor as I took 3 steps forward, moving from the pew into the open space of the aisle. I didn't need a microphone. My voice, when I spoke, was not a shout, but it was clear and carried the chilling authority of the truth. "I object." The words hung in the air, sharp and undeniable. The priest stared at me, his mouth slightly agape. Emily's face crumpled, her lower lip beginning to tremble. "Mom, no, please sit down," she whispered, a desperate, horrified plea. Mark shot me a look of pure fury, his charming facade melting away to reveal the cold arrogance beneath. "Martha, this is hardly the time or the place," he hissed, his voice low and threatening. I ignored them both. My focus was on one thing and one thing only. I continued to walk slowly, deliberately up the aisle. I wasn't addressing the crowd. I was addressing him. "Mark," I said, my voice as calm as a frozen lake, "before my daughter binds her life to yours, before she takes a vow under God in this holy place, I need you to answer a question for this congregation, for our family, for me." I stopped about 10 feet from the altar, forcing him to look down at me. "You are asking to be a husband to my daughter and a father to the child she carries." I let that hang in the air for a moment, watching the color drain from his face. "So, tell us all, Mark. Do you love this child? The one my daughter is pregnant with right now?
Do you promise, before God and all these witnesses, to be a true and faithful father to it for all of your days? It was the perfect trap, a question he could not refuse to answer without immediately exposing himself, a public declaration of fatherhood. He was cornered. I could see the panic in his eyes as his mind raced. He glanced at his parents, at Eleanor, and then back at me. He had no choice. He had to continue the charade. He forced a tight, confident smile. "Of course I do," he said, his voice ringing with that same false sincerity from his vows. "I love Emily, and I will love and cherish our child. I promise to be the best father I can be." A murmur of relief went through some of the guests. They thought I was just an overprotective mother having a momentary breakdown. I let the murmur die down. I held the silence for a beat, letting his lie solidify in the air. And then I turned my head slowly, my gaze sweeping past Mark, past my weeping daughter, and landing squarely on the best man, on Ryan. He had been watching the exchange with a kind of detached amusement, a smirk playing on his lips. The smirk vanished as my eyes locked with his. He looked like a deer caught in the headlights of an oncoming truck. "Well, that is just wonderful news," I said, my voice still conversational, yet carrying a new razor-sharp edge. "Did you hear that, Ryan? Your best friend just made a sacred promise to raise a child." I took another step forward. "You must be so proud." Ryan's face went from pale to ghostly white. He started to stammer, I don't. "I'm sure you are," I continued, relentless. "It must take a great weight off your shoulders. So please, won't you offer your congratulations to the happy couple? And to the child? Your child." A collective audible gasp swept through the church. This was no longer a vague objection. This was a specific, targeted accusation. The whispers started instantly, like fire spreading through dry grass. What did she say? Ryan's child? Emily let out a strangled sob and swayed on her feet, grabbing Mark's arm for support. Mark's face was a mask of pure, murderous rage. He yelled, "This is insane! She's delirious! Someone get her out of here!" Ryan, meanwhile, looked like he was about to be physically ill. He started to back away, shaking his head. No, she's lying." "Am I?" I asked softly. I reached into my small purse, and my fingers closed around the folded pieces of paper. I didn't need to read it aloud. The simple act of producing it was enough. It was tangible, proof. It was real. Emily saw the paper in my hand, and a sound of pure despair escaped her lips. She knew exactly what it was. Her lies, her carefully constructed world, were about to be burned to the ground with a single piece of paper. But I wasn't going to give the paper to the priest or read it to the crowd. My audience was one person.
In the ensuing chaos, with people starting to stand up and shout, I turned my back on the altar. I ignored the pleas and the threats. I walked, with a purpose that felt as old as time, directly across the aisle to where Eleanor Vance was sitting. She hadn't moved. She had watched the entire exchange like a hawk, her face grim. Her piercing blue eyes were fixed on me as I approached. The family members around her looked on in horror and confusion. I stopped directly in front of her chair. I didn't say a word. I simply unfolded the printed email and held it out to her. Our eyes met. In that moment, an understanding passed between us. Two women from different worlds, bound by a shared belief in the corrosive nature of lies. She took the paper from my hand. The moment the paper left my fingers and entered Eleanor Vance's, the power in the room shifted. It was a tangible thing, like a change in atmospheric pressure before a storm breaks. All the shouting and chaos seemed to fade into a dull roar in the background. The only thing that mattered was the quiet, intense drama unfolding in the front pew.
Eleanor held the single sheet of paper with both hands. She didn't need reading glasses. Her sharp eyes devoured the text, her expression unmoving, like a judge reading a damning piece of evidence. I watched her face, searching for a reaction. For a few seconds, there was nothing but an intense, unnerving stillness. Then, I saw it. A subtle tightening of her jaw, a flicker of utter contempt in her eyes, so cold it could have frozen fire. She read it a second time, more slowly now, as if to be certain. Finally, she lowered the paper and folded it once, with a crisp, final motion. She looked up, not at me, but at the scene at the altar. Her family, her legacy, her disgrace. Mark was still trying to control the situation, his voice a mixture of pleading and fury. "Aunt Eleanor, please, don't listen to her. It's all lies, a pathetic attempt to ruin our happiness." Emily was now openly sobbing, her body shaking, holding on to Mark as if he were a life raft and she was drowning. "Grandma Eleanor," she cried, using the informal title she adopted to endear herself, "please, don't let her do this to us." Eleanor Vance ignored them completely, as if they were nothing more than buzzing insects. She turned her steely gaze to her nephew, Mark's father, Robert Vance, who was standing frozen in the pew behind her. "Robert," she said, her voice quiet but carrying the unmistakable command of a general. "Get me my cane." Robert, a man who ran a multi-million-dollar corporation, scurried to obey like a schoolboy. He handed her the heavy ebony cane with its polished silver handle. She took it, her grip firm. She used it to push herself to her feet. Despite her age, she stood tall, a pillar of righteous anger. She took a step into the aisle and struck the base of the cane hard against the marble floor. Crack! The sound echoed through the sanctuary like a gunshot. Instant silence. Every eye was now on the matriarch. "Enough!" she boomed, her voice filled with a power that belied her years. She swept her gaze across the altar, her eyes landing on Mark with the force of a physical blow. "You," she said, her voice dripping with disdain, "you are a fool and a liar. You have brought shame upon the Vance name." Then she turned to Emily. "And you are a conniving, deceitful child who mistook our wealth for a lack of intelligence. You are not worthy of this family." She turned back to the crowd, her voice ringing through the silent church. "This wedding is a farce. It is built on a foundation of greed, infidelity, and dishonor. As the head of the Vance family, I declare that this union will not happen. This engagement is terminated. The celebration is over." She then pointed the tip of her cane toward Mark's parents. "Catherine, Robert, you will deal with your son. His access to the family trust is hereby suspended indefinitely. We will discuss his permanent disinheritance later." Disinheritance. The word fell like a guillotine. Mark's face went slack with shock, the color draining away completely until he was the color of ash. His mother, Catherine, let out a small, strangled gasp. Eleanor Vance was not finished. She turned her formidable gaze on the Vance's family lawyer who was a guest in the third row. "Mr. Davies, you will begin proceedings immediately to recover any and all funds, gifts, and assets that were extended to Miss Sanders and her family under the fraudulent pretense of this marriage." This was it, the full, catastrophic fallout. She was not just canceling the wedding, she was systematically dismantling the entire lie, piece by piece, and salting the earth where it stood. And then, the real chaos began. It was no longer whispers, but a full-blown spectacle of collapse. Emily finally let go of Mark and crumpled to the floor in a heap of white silk and shattered dreams, her wails echoing in the cavernous space. Mark, his future turning to dust before his eyes, spun around and lunged toward Ryan. "You! This is your fault!" he screamed, shoving him hard. Ryan stumbled backward, tripping over a floral arrangement and crashing to the floor. Guests were on their feet, some rushing to help, others pulling out their phones to record the unbelievable scene. Mark's parents were trying to reason with a stony-faced Eleanor. The priest stood by the altar, looking utterly helpless, as if his church had been invaded by a foreign army. I stood by Eleanor's side, watching the destruction I had wrought. I felt no triumph, no joy, only a profound, aching sadness and the grim satisfaction of a necessary, terrible job well done. I had set a fire to burn away the lies, and the flames were consuming everything. Eleanor Vance turned to me, her expression softening almost imperceptibly. She placed a frail, gloved hand on my arm. "You did the right thing, Mrs. Sanders," she said quietly, her voice for my ears only. "Honor required it." She then turned and with her head held high began her slow, regal walk out of the sanctuary, her cane clicking with grim finality on the floor. Her family, shamed and broken, followed in her wake. The house of Vance was in ruins, and in the middle of it all, my daughter was still weeping on the floor. The fire was over. Now came the long, hard work of sifting through the ashes. The drive home from the estate was silent. Emily sat in the passenger seat, huddled against the door, her tear-streaked face turned to the window. The extravagant wedding dress was bundled in the back, a crumpled ghost of her shattered dreams. I didn't know what to say. What do you say to the daughter whose life you have just publicly detonated for her own good? We walked into my quiet, familiar house, the one she grew up in. It felt like a world away from the cold grandeur of the Vance estate. She went straight to her old bedroom and closed the door. I didn't follow. She needed to be alone with the consequences of her choices. I made a pot of tea and sat at the kitchen table, the silence of my own home feeling heavy and strange.
A few hours later, there was a knock at the door. It was Jacob. His eyes were red-rimmed, his face etched with a shame so deep it was painful to look at. He was holding a piece of paper in his hand, the second copy of the email I had printed. He walked in without a word and sat down opposite me at the table. He pushed the paper across the table toward me. "I was going to give it to her," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "To Mrs. Vance. If you hadn't, I was standing up to do it when you started walking toward her." He finally looked at me, his eyes swimming with tears. "I'm sorry, Mom." I was a coward.
A Mac Abraham song. Like choosing junior laws. Mac means top in a profession or specialized area. Let's use Mac in a sentence. The professor was a Mac at Microsoft Excel.
After a while, as Tom and little David were busy examining a ladybug on a rose leaf, Emily came and sat beside me on the garden bench. "I have something for you, Mom," she said quietly. She reached into her purse and pulled out a cashier's check. She placed it in my hand. It was made out to me for the final payment owed to the Vance family. "We did it," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "It's over. Tom helped with the last part. We're finally free." I looked at the check, then at my daughter. Her face was no longer that of a scared girl playing a part. It was the face of a woman, a strong, capable, honest woman. A woman I was incredibly proud of. "No, sweetheart," I said, folding her hand over the check and giving it back to her. "You did it. This was your mountain to climb." She smiled, a real, genuine smile that reached her eyes. "I couldn't have done it without you, Mom. You saved me from myself." "I love you, Emily," I said, my own eyes filling with tears. "I love you too, Mom," she replied. We sat there for a long time, watching her son and her husband, listening to their laughter float on the warm afternoon air. I looked up at the clear blue Texas sky, and I could almost feel David's presence beside me, his hand on my shoulder. A quiet sense of peace settled over me, a peace I had fought so hard to find. People often say a mother's love is unconditional. I've learned that's only half the truth. Love, true love, must have one condition, a demand for respect. Not for the parent, but for the self. There was a time I thought giving my daughter the world was the best way to love her. But in the end, I realized that the greatest act of love I ever performed was not paying for her dream wedding, but having the courage to burn it to the ground. I didn't save a marriage, I saved my daughter's soul. And in doing so, I finally honored my promise. I saved my husband's legacy. Thank you for letting me share my story with you all. It means more than you know.